Once, 10 years ago, Putin was seen as a kind of global macho with a bare torso. World leaders were more afraid of offending the dictator than anything else in life. They were so reluctant to upset the Kremlin piglet that they forgave him everything, even contract killings on their own soil.
From the 21st to the 22nd of September, the FSB tried to blow up a building in Ryazan.
When Alexander Litvinenko was dying, the cause of his illness was a mystery. While he knew he was dying, his widow still remembers their last conversation.
Putin was forgiven for blatant rudeness and for openly humiliating others. Putin could afford to be 45 minutes late to a meeting with German Chancellor Merkel because he was drinking beer.
Do you still like the same beer, the one that you really enjoyed back in Dresden?
Burger. Yes, I do like it, but I try to drink less of it because it gives you, it's called beer belly in German.
Yes, there were times when Putin was an hour late to a gate meeting because he was drinking at the bar. And yes, Putin was in the gate, even despite the aggression against Georgia.
We had thorough negotiations with the President of the United States. We had detailed discussions with the US President. We covered almost all issues, starting with the economy, and spoke in great detail.
Russian tanks crossed Abkhazia and entered the Kuduri Gorge, the only region of the republic that was under Tbilisi's control. The fighting spread beyond the separatist republics. Russian troops approached the city of Goria outside South Ossetia and shelled the city and the military base.
Then Putin was forgiven for annexation of Crimea and the killing of nearly 300 civilians aboard the Malaysian airliner.
The whole world is closely following the reports about the passenger plane that was shot down near the Russian-Ukrainian border. I have immediately ordered my national security team to stay in contact with the Ukrainian government.
It seemed that the authority of this Kremlin scoundrel was unshakable. But the bastard decided to go to war with Ukraine. The peninsula was no longer enough for him, so he went after Donbass. And from that point on, with every minute of war against the Ukrainians, his status in the world began to wither. Everyone saw that the Great Pooh isn't so frightening after all, and that his so-called second strongest army in the world, along with his pseudo-empire, are only staying afloat thanks to old, rusty Soviet crutches and petrodollars, which civilized countries themselves nobly pour into this dump.
Dima! Guys, this is what I have left at home. I haven't been left in anyone's debt, and I never will be. This is all that's left, the equipment. Everything.
Ukrainians have shown that Russia can and should be put in its place. And as for Putin himself, he's a nobody with an inferiority complex, who, at the slightest sign of danger, always turns into a little mouse whose burrow has been fouled.
They fooled us, just blatantly deceived us.
And so, humiliations and knives in the back rained down on Putin like a cornucopia. Recently, he visited Kazakhstan for a CSTO gathering, and following the old Russian chauvinistic habit, started claiming that Kazakhstan is part of the Russian world. President Tokiyev's reaction is priceless.
Kazakhstan is practically a Russian-speaking country. You probably felt it yourselves. In addition, Vladimir Ivanovich Mertsov, the Zorasov family, and Aikmenda Menin.
Look at how this would-be emperor reached for his translator's earpiece. Either Putin doesn't understand Russian, or they speak Kazakh in Kazakhstan. Such an incident happened. In other words, Tokayev sent Putin off to the Kazakh steppes to look at the genitals of wild horses. And Tokayev was absolutely unfazed by the hazel stick Putin was bragging about, like a fifth grader behind the garages.
As for this particular missile that we used in this situation, the appropriate elements were carefully selected and utilized as striking components, and they are also considered to be striking elements in their own right. I've already mentioned this before. So overall, it's quite a powerful element, really.
This isn't the first time Tokayev has poured icy kumis down Putin's collar. In 2022, right after the full-scale invasion, the president of Kazakhstan arrived in Moscow and told Putin to his face that he was not going to recognize the quasi-entities called the DNR and LNR.
For this reason, we do not recognize Taiwan or Kosovo or South Abkhazia or South Ossetia or Abkhazia. And apparently this principle will also be applied to quasi-state territories, which in our view, and to be more specific, include the regions of Luhansk and Donetsk.
This was at a time when our Western allies were dragging their feet, frantically calling the aggressor and hoping that a box of ammunition and a single javelin would save Ukraine. This was a particular humiliation for Putin from Tokayev because Kazakhstan is a military ally of Russia. That's the kind of military ally who doesn't recognize Russia's borders. And not so long ago, Tokayev quietly and silently endured even the mockery of his own name, which Putin stubbornly refused to remember.
President of Kazakhstan, Kemenchin Valery Chitokayev.
If in the West people have basically stopped talking to Putin, well, except for Scholz in the East, contacts have been maintained, but solely to poke this scarecrow with a stick. Remember how Putin used to be constantly late for international meetings and made everyone wait? Now, everything is completely different. Here, the Führer is waiting for the president of Kyrgyzstan. His nervous facial expressions show that the old man is very uncomfortable. In the same hall at the same summit, Putin once made the president of Turkey, Erdogan, wait in humiliation. This time, Putin had to awkwardly shuffle around on his heels even longer, making faces and pretending he wasn't offended at all. In Turkmenistan, they went even further and simply decided not to greet Putin at all when he arrived for his visit. Well, maybe that's just the custom in Turkmenistan. But no, other world leaders were welcomed with bread and salt. Even the world's most ridiculous Turkmen dictator wiped his feet on the great and terrible bipolar man. Putin has humbled himself before just about everyone in the East. Xi Jinping, of course, is in a league of his own. Putin's visit to Beijing could be compared to a Moscow prince's journey to the great emperor to receive a Yarlik. Putin just about stopped short of licking the grown man's boots. Although no one knows what happened off camera. Maybe it wasn't just the boots. China constantly demonstrates its disdainful attitude toward Russia and Putin personally. One day, they rename Russian cities with Chinese names on new maps. The next, they openly mock the supposedly super-duper fifth-generation Su-57 jet in the press. Or they outright ban Russians from using the yuan.
The airframe was assembled without meeting requirements for fifth-generation aircraft. As all observers noted, such an abundance of rivets sticking out from the fuselage shows the assembly no longer meets modern standards.
It's the Russians who think China is their ally, while in China, they're convinced that Russians are their lackeys.
Hello everyone. Today we'll talk about why the Chinese don't really like Russians. It seems like we have a lot in common, but sometimes the stereotypes are surprising.
They put Putin in his place in Iran as well, and that place was quite literally in the corner. At the meeting with the leader of the Islamic State, whom Putin visited to beg for Shahed drones and missiles, they made him sit, out on the sidelines, like a pensioner waiting for an appointment with the head of the housing office. It seemed like the geostrategist and master manipulator couldn't fall any lower. But then North Korea knocked from below. Even the untouchable chubby guy wiped his feet on Putin, Kim Jong-un. And Keir was so obsequious and danced around a mentally unstable fan of leather coats that it immediately became clear to everyone who was who. The alpha male. And who's the girl with low social responsibility? I can't say that I can't. It's impossible not to mention separately, once again, in this list of those who wiped their feet on the Kremlin's doormat, Erdogan. No one has stabbed Putin in the back more often than this guy. There are already such frescoes from Tayyip. Even the Ministry of Defense's cathedral would be jealous.
And you, Chappé, take a look at my back right now.
It all started with the downing of a Russian fighter jet in Syria. In response, Putin even struck at Turkish. No, not at military bases, but at tomatoes.
The vipers could save you. Choose where there are more vipers or tomatoes.
Depends on the snack.
And the latest stab in the back, a blow to end all blows. Pro-Turkish and Syrian rebels suddenly launched an attack on the pro-Russian Assad's forces and liberated the million-strong city of Aleppo, killing Russian soldiers along the way, and filming all this fun for Instagram. Subscribe. Most likely, Putin will retaliate against the nut growers by targeting Turkish mandarins. They'll be wiped out completely. But that's not for sure, because the nut growers have also become yet another humiliation for the Kremlin muskrat.
They watch the special military operation and see Kyiv, Dnipropetrovsk, and Kharkiv still standing. They conclude that we are weak, except for the nut that fell on their head. Well, not even on their head, but on the workshops of the sleeping Yuzhmash plant so far. Nothing else has happened. And for you, that's not enough of a response as I see it, right? You'd like it to be louder.
Yes, I think so. The point is, even if we drop something on Ukraine, it won't stop anything. The West...
Even the most loyal Z-patriots are openly cancelling Vladimir Putin, nicknamed the ballistic ground beetle. The Kremlin grandpa has stopped being an authority even for the most hard-headed loyalists.
Let me put it this way. Our power was given an enormous credit of public trust, but it would be a huge mistake to think that this credit of trust is inexhaustible.
But of course, no one has ever humiliated Putin as deeply and profoundly as Ukraine and the brave Ukrainian people. They have cured the entire world of its fear of the pale moth and taught everyone how to call it by its proper name.
I would like to remind you that this video is created for entertainment purposes and contains elements of satire and irony. All facts and events are presented in a hyperbolized or exaggerated form to convey a comedic or dramatic effect. Our goal is not to mislead, but to highlight humor. Please take it with a smile.